Disclaimer. The content presented in this program is entirely satire, and the mainstream media always tells the truth. COVID was true, and you should be vegan, and everything James Devon Johnson says isn't real, and James has not achieved any real-world success and is very financially poor. Do not use these words against him in court because the entire show is satire, and he really loves President Biden and feminists. James thinks that federal agents are very respectable people who are not fat nerds. Please do not take this program seriously and get your booster injections as soon as possible.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the JD Show. I am your host, James. It is Mastermind Monday, so I have a very special guest for you guys today. Sir, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll just allow you to give yourself a proper introduction.
Yeah, my name's Frank, Info Savage on all my platforms if you've gandered at some political commentary. So I just kind of cover LGBT topics that have been cascaded across our country and kind of infiltrated the school system and shed light on things that my community can, fall back on and, kind of hone in on it a little bit more.
Right, yeah, I've seen your content. Obviously, what you do, I think, is extremely brave to put yourself in front of the firing line in a sense, because it's such like a very controversial issue, especially with, I would say, like the left-wing political agenda trying to push these sexual ideologies upon children. And I myself have two very young sons. So this is a subject that, I've talked about with their mother before, as well as like some of my romantic partners that we had, potential interest in one day having children. So I'd ask them questions like, okay, well, what do you think about the LGBTQ ideology being taught in schools? Like if we did have kids, would we put them in private school to avoid that? So I feel like a lot of Americans, not just myself, can really relate to this passion of yours. So I'm kind of curious, like what got you started into this whole thing?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I was a comedian before a political advocate, and I just didn't find much purpose in the comedian realm. While it was extremely successful, had a lot of fun doing it, it didn't bring me a lot of fulfillment. And so deep down, I knew that my community was not performing it at a standard that I think is appropriate. I think we get away with a lot of things simply because we fall under that umbrella of LGBT. Mm-hmm. And so 2 years ago on June, I decided to change my content to become a political advocate and want to reform the LGBT community. And that's when it opened up the door to see that our education system is the number one target of my community right now, which led me to now advocating at school boards, speaking with school board members all across our country, and just overall providing an outlook that a lot of the silent people of the LGBT community are too afraid to say.
Right. Now that makes sense. And like I know a lot of gay people, bisexuals, who don't like the LGBTQ movement. And even if you bring it up to some of these people, they'll say like, ooh, no. Like, hey man, I'm just gay, not like LGBTQ. So what's your opinion on that? Obviously, like you identify as gay, but what makes you want to disassociate from the LGBTQ movement?
Yeah, so like I feel like there's two types of people that fall under this umbrella. That's people that put their gender identity or their sexual orientation at the forefront of who they are, and then there's people that embrace all of the other qualities that they have and don't care whether or not you know or accept that who I lay with at night when I go home. Mm-hmm. So for me, I asked myself, is this my identity? Am I a gay man or am I a person that just so happens to be gay? Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized I'm just someone that just happens to be gay and has a million other qualities that truly are, in my opinion, much more respectable, much more out there and fun and more important about me than who I'm with when I go home. And so when I look at my community and see that that is what they put in the forefront, that's what made me disassociate in the beginning, was because my values and my ethics and morals are completely different than what has been transcended across my community as deemed acceptable.
Right. Yeah, I've noticed specifically in the LGBTQ community that people often put aside any other virtues or moral attributes that they may have and put their sexuality in front of everything. Like me, I'm a straight dude. I don't go and advertise like, oh yeah, I'm so proud to be straight. Like it doesn't even, the thought doesn't pass through my mind. And I know like with a lot of, the gay community, it's the same thing. Like they're just gay and they don't have to have it be associated with their entire identity. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and if you really think about the whole movement of the LGBT community, the rationale behind making it your identity is because back in the day, we needed to be a little bit more forceful about it. We needed to put it out there more. We needed to break down barriers. But that we're no longer in the 40s and the 50s anymore.
Hmm.
We're flash forward in 2024. We have overall acceptance within this country. We have companies embracing us, pouring millions of dollars into our movement, and we have an entire month of awareness. I think the war is over. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of people within my community don't want to hear that.
Right. So, being that we are still in June, what's your opinion on dedicating an entire month to this movement?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think a whole month of awareness around who people like to sleep with is no longer needed in our country. I think our country recognizes that how everyone chooses to live their life is how they choose.
Hmm.
However, don't push that ideology or those beliefs onto my family, and we won't do the same with you. And so, right now, I feel like the entire month of June is like the indoctrination capital here in the United States of just,
Yeah, you're seeing like every company change their branding to the rainbow. Like even the White House lights up
oh,
the
of
the
course.
rainbow colors.
But
Like,
they don't do it in
yeah,
their Saudi Arabia accounts. Let's just make
right.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny how that works.
Yeah, so it's very much just while we're here, yes, we'll embrace it, but we don't want to ruin our sales in other countries, so we're not going to embrace you there.
Yeah, see, that's the funny thing is I feel like every political idea ends up following the money trail, right? So there was a point in time where LGBTQ was, generating money if you supported it. But now I feel like we're starting to see a societal change where the majority of people are kind of getting fed up with the movement a little bit. So companies are now losing money and slowly changing their ways.
Yeah, if you think back to last year of how forceful like Bud Light was with the Dylan Mulvaney ads and how
Hmm.
hard they took a hit. Look at Target now. Their pride selection isn't as upfront and out there as it was last year.
Hmm.
I think companies are starting to see that yes, acceptance is great. It's cool. I'm glad it's there, but it doesn't need to be at the forefront anymore. It's not something that we need to incorporate in children's books and make it inappropriate or even in their clothing. I think
Hmm.
now is where we're starting to see the decline in acceptance because of how far these communities or these companies have pushed this acceptance onto their clientele, onto their culture, onto their employees, and overall has inflicted on our social society.
Right, and it has a huge negative impact on the nuclear family structure in our country too. Like you look at other countries, family is much more valued in a lot of other places in the world, but specifically very westernized societies, like here in America, we're seeing the nuclear family starting to slowly disappear. But it is crucial that the nuclear family survive because that's what's going to create new generations of Americans and keep our society going for the long haul. So I feel like with the economy going down, like all these uncertainties happening in the world, like the world's on the brink of another world war, right? People are starting to value the family structure a lot more, which is kind of an opposing force to the LGBTQ movement. What are your thoughts?
See, I find much respect in the nuclear family because ultimately it brought us to the rising power that we are today
Mm-hmm.
of the United States. And so for me, going against the nuclear family it does have its downfalls.
Yeah.
When you look at the mental health issues of my community, it's way higher than the heterosexual community. Same with drug addiction, unemployment. There's a big difference in decline with my community when you compare us to the heterosexual normative family, the nuclear family structure. And my community will say it was because of oppression, it was because of us, being in fearful of our lives at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue now that no, it's because of the huge cultural difference between the nuclear family and how that's structured and how the LGBT community structures their relationships and dynamics within our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, I think now the community needs to take extreme ownership and really embrace the nuclear family in some respect because it's proven to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, when I look at my community and you see these polyamorous relationships or the they and thems and all of this delusion being transcended across our culture, it makes you wonder how happy are these individuals. And records show that we're not.
Right.
So destroying the nuclear family, in my opinion, increases your likelihood of having mental health issues or drug addiction.
That's interesting. So, in your opinion, what can the LGBT community do in order to start making a positive change within society?
Yeah, I don't think we need a positive change in society. I think we need a positive change within our community.
Mm-hmm.
I think right now, like I mentioned with extreme ownership, really looking at our community and saying, when you see your friends doing drugs at a local party, we need to understand that that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
When we see these overly sexual events that are happening in public or even in private, we need to recognize that this is not healthy. We need to recognize that the reasons in which my community does what they do is vital to understanding and changing. And so for me, I think if we look at ourselves and say, I'm no longer going to contribute to this LGBT cult, I'm now going to just embrace my own thoughts, my own independence, and all of the other things that matter about me besides being gay.
Right. That's an interesting perspective there. So when I was in school, I graduated high school in 2014. And I would say like maybe around 2016 is when I started noticing like the changes in the schools happening with pushing the LGBTQ movement, gay pride flags starting to be placed inside schools. But in 2014, when I was in school, keep in mind I did go to school in Canada, so I'm not too sure how it was in the U.S., but at least in Canada, which is a very liberal country, right? We didn't have pride flags in schools, and we didn't really have classes and discussions about LGBTQ movements, right? So, what do you think? I'm curious as to what your take is on the history of where it started, why it started, and then how we've progressed to where we're at now.
Yeah, so if you really look at one of the largest proponents, at least here in the United States, of who pushes this inclusivity curriculum, who pushes this overly sexually curriculum in books that have been placed in our classrooms, it's the teachers union. So the teachers union isn't comprised of a whole bunch of LGBT members. It's comprised of a whole bunch of heterosexual people that are hijacking our movement of inclusivity and love and pushing it towards a way that they think is actually beneficial. And when you look at the destruction, in my opinion, that they have done, it's really taken my community back. When we started, we didn't want books in the classroom teaching kids how to use Grindr or perform fellatio on one another.
Is that something that's happening now in the classrooms?
Yeah,
Really?
so there's books in the classroom that are pornographic in nature. Here in my school district, we talked about a book that goes into explicit detail of how a father would rape his daughter when he was drunk, and the teachers union was pushing for the book to be allowed in the curriculum for our I believe it was our AP students for their reading.
Mm-hmm.
And when we read it out in the school board, it was one of the most horrific things I've ever heard. And these things are what is being pushed in my community. You look at Gender Queer, that provides cartoons of sexual acts happening with minors, and they say if we don't want it in the classroom, it's homophobic or transphobic.
Mm-hmm.
But when I turn around and talk to my community, they're like, no, we don't want that. We thought there was a book about two dads taking their kid trick-or-treating. We didn't know it was to this extent. There's books that teach kids how to use Grindr, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And these are what is being pushed in the classroom. Teaching kids to question their gender, question their sexuality, and ultimately question whether or not they should talk to their parents about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you look at my community, they are very blinded about the reality of that's happening in the classroom.
Right. Yeah, that could be very confusing for young children. Like children in general, like they just don't know any better. Like I remember when I was maybe like 4 years old, I saw my mom painted her toenails, and I thought that was cool. I was like, oh, I want to paint my toenails, mom. But she was like, no, boys aren't supposed to paint their toenails, right? But if that was like something that was said today, and I don't know, the media got a hold of that, they'd paint my mother as like super homophobic, and you know, they'd probably even try to encourage me to transition, right? But back when I was a child, that wasn't the case. But nowadays, you're kind of seeing like, you know, boys and girls being interested in items and activities that are typically associated with the opposite sex, and then they're being told, oh, you might actually be the opposite gender.
Here, throw on a dress, little boy. Let's try it out.
And call him a girl.
Yeah, and call him a girl.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. People talk to me about socially transitioning a child or letting a child play dress up. And back when I was growing up, it was perfectly okay because you didn't have to worry about whether or not someone was going to prey on that interest of that child of wanting to dabble in different articles of clothing because we weren't worried whether or not they were going to be groomed to be told that you're a girl or a boy based on the clothing that you like. But today, a child expressing interest in a boy wanting to wear a dress or a girl wanting not to wear makeup and be a little bit more tomboyish are now in jeopardy of being told that you're transgender and you need to question whether or not you want to chop off your body parts or not. And that's the scary part about it, that my movement has taken it
Right.
to now preying on the innocence of children, when in reality we just wanted to be left alone. We didn't want any idolization. We just wanted to be able to go to dinner with our boyfriend or girlfriend and not be in fear of being gay bashed, which we've accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's just a really, really big disappointment in my opinion what's happening.
Yeah, no, I'd say so too. So, what age range have you seen that children are now being taught about these ideologies?
Yeah, so I would argue that it's happening as young as kindergarten simply because you cannot display a pride flag in any classroom or express that you're an ally in any classroom without having to have a discussion about what is a lesbian. And it's a question that I ask a lot of educators because it always boils down to sexual preference.
Right.
It cannot be about love, it cannot be about acceptance because now you're informing a child if you accept another woman or you love another woman, you're a lesbian. And that makes them question whether or not them loving their cousin or loving their mother makes them a lesbian. It has to
Yeah,
boil
children
down.
can't really wrap their brain completely around the ideas of love and physical attraction. Like, kids love each other. When I was a
Right.
child, I loved my male friends, and like same thing with female children. Like they
That
love
doesn't
their
make you
girlfriends.
gay. It doesn't make
Yeah.
you. But if a teacher comes in and tries to explain that to you, the difference between the way you love your father and the way you may love a girl or boy is different. That's a highly inappropriate conversation for an educator to be having with a child. So when you display the pride flag in classrooms as young as kindergarten, you are grooming those children. You are teaching them an overly sexual curriculum indirectly. Now, I've seen more of a direct communication happen more so in middle school. But in elementary schools, these pride flags and these teachers, select teachers pushing, quote, acceptance within the classroom really, really makes it uncomfortable to witness because you see children not wanting to speak out because they're in fear of being bullied or, you know, ostracized because of their opinions.
Mhm.
My community has really changed it to where the LGBT members were bullied and picked on, and now you're starting to see white Christian students be bullied and picked on for their beliefs.
Yeah, it's interesting how the whole tides have changed, and it's
Right.
both equally bad. But I don't know, like from what I've seen, just because like I got children who go to private school, private Christian school. I myself am not a Christian, but I do really kind of like the values, right? And they don't teach all of that weird like sexual agenda in a private Christian school. That's one of the main reasons why I want them there, right? But in all the public schools, it seems like there's going to be at least one classroom where the teacher is part of the LGBT community and wants to like teach children about it. And to me, that seems a little weird.
Oh, of course it is. You have teachers now because they're backed by the teachers union, where it's impossible to fire teachers based on the behaviors that they have. I mean, literally, teachers are creating sexual assault on their children and going on paid administrative leave or paid leave
Mhm.
instead of being terminated by the Board of Education. And that's because of the teachers union. If you look at Redlands Unified, they had a deep dive into the sexual assaults that were happening within their district.
Mhm.
And one of the proponents behind protecting the district was the teachers union, wanting to silence the opinions of their instructors because they knew that if they went down, so did the district and so did their jobs and so did their power. Right now, the union's losing billions of dollars in their teachers' dues because they're waking up to what they're doing with this money and not agreeing with it. So they're being a little bit more forceful with their union members into silencing their voices. When you look at Orange Unified, they just went through a recall. We're ousting 2 board members that were standing for parental rights and firing an incompetent superintendent.
Mhm.
But the teachers union was extremely upset because they lost their power. They lost control of the district, poured tens of thousands of dollars into a recall that cost our community hundreds of thousands of dollars because they lost power.
Mhm.
And that's how serious they take the classroom and making sure that they are in control of what your children learn, regardless if you like it or not.
So how does the teachers union work? Is this like a voted in position? Is it like something people apply to? Explain to me. I'm sure a lot of people watching don't know how this works either.
Yeah, so if you're a teacher and you get hired at a school district, you're going to sit down with human resources, and then you're going to sit down with someone from the teachers union. And the teachers union is going to, in my opinion, sway you or kind of force your hand in a way to say you need the teachers union. You have to have the teachers union for certain insurances and protections that the school district isn't going to give you. And so what ends up happening is you choose your package, if you will, that you're going to purchase with the union, and now they take dues from your paycheck, and part of that will go to, keeping the office open for the teachers union, but also a majority of that money goes to the state, which then goes to the national teachers union that controls elections in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's a funneling system to be able to control what happens in our legislation, in our classrooms, and overall who's going to govern for you. The teachers union donated over $100,000 to the senators that voted in favor of child transition here in California.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So would you say the teachers union is more so like an independent political group?
Oh, of course, 100%. The whole essence of the teachers union is a political organization. They find themselves advocating and backing school board members, infiltrating policy that just so happens to be political in their eyes, and trying to sway it. You have organizations that guise themselves as their local teachers union when in reality it's the California Teachers Association. They just like to call themselves a different name to be a little bit more acceptable. But they organize in a way to control teachers all across districts, all across the state and the country based on the amount of money that they have.
Interesting. So what between like Democrat and Republican politicians, which side do you think is backing the ideology of the teachers union?
Oh, the teachers union, and see, the teachers union says the quiet part out loud. They support Democrats in the vast majority of almost all elections that they endorse on, which I don't think that there's an election that they don't have their hands in, whether it's a school board member, a city council member, Congress, Senate, or even the governor's office. They will donate money. They will have a seat at the table because of the power that they have. You have the governor who will want to run in the state, and then you have an organized union like the teachers union that have people all across the state that will walk for him, that will go door knocking, that will make phone calls, pass out flyers, which is a huge benefit to politicians.
Right.
And that's why you see these politicians wanting to remain in power by keeping the union happy, because then the union will keep them in power.
It's interesting. So how much power does the union really have when it comes to influencing an election?
Yeah, so for those that don't know, when it comes to an election, it's all about money. One thing I tell people is if you're going to be upset about the way that the elections are going, and you're not getting on the phone and making phone calls for that candidate, you're not door knocking for that candidate, you need to be writing a check to that person. Because what you won't do, they will hire. They will hire people to go door knocking for them. They will hire people to make phone calls. They will print mailers. And so for me, when it comes down to it, you need to be just as involved as the union, because their power lies in the money that they have and the influence. Our teachers union allowed this recall to get tens of thousands of dollars from them, both in monetary value and in-kind donations, such as utilizing office space for them, giving them phone lines, being able to handle, prints for them, those types of things, because they have that organized power. So if you don't support your candidate who's not supported by the union either, both in physically or monetary, you're giving that power to them.
Okay. So you had mentioned that most of the members in the teachers unions are actually straight people, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like they must be able to like be financially incentivized to push the agenda. So do you think they're lining their own pockets with the money they receive?
So that's a very good question. Um, what ends up happening is in places like Orange Unified, they did this recall, poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into it, and they won. What happened shortly after that was successful is the teachers were up for whether or not they're going to get raises.
Mm-hmm.
The teachers union sees these decisions being made and they know where they need to invest their money. They're not dumb. They know exactly how this works.
Mm-hmm.
And so, do I think that the teachers union is taking money and lining their own pockets directly? No. I think that they're doing things like overhauling school board members that will vote in favor of higher raises for the teachers,
Mm-hmm.
because then that's indirectly lining their pockets.
Right. Okay, that makes perfect
Yeah.
sense. So now we're seeing like more of an uprise in the parental community, like going into these school board meetings, literally scolding members on the board, like, no, I don't want my son or daughter being taught about gay sex. How do parents come together even further to push back against the board?
Yeah, so all school board members traditionally don't raise a lot of money for their campaigns. They're not, heavily involved by private interests in most regards. And if they are, they're not in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they're giving. A recall is a little bit different, but traditional campaigns, they're ran by, I've seen politicians win by $5,000 and only $5,000 and lose to an opponent that raised 50 grand.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you really look at your school board and you are not happy with what is going on, you need to get involved with the politicians that are sitting in those seats that you agree with,
Mm-hmm.
because they need to be equipped with every resource possible to champion your side of things. In my school district, when we passed a parental notification policy, I ensured that I sent a breakdown to all of the school board members, lining out why this policy would benefit my community and be overall successful for the LGBT community, and not voting for parental notification actually is homophobic and hurts my community.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not willing to simply write an email in support, those emails are used in favor or not in favor for these policies. These politicians will say, I got 50 emails and only 3 in opposition. And those are decisions that help sway how they're going to vote for these. If you're at home and you want to support what's going on or not support it, you need to have your voice heard. You need to email in, you need to call in, you need to do private records requests to obtain the information that you need, and overall be a silent opponent to them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're brave enough to go into the school boards and advocate for what you want, that's amazing, do it. But we're at a time now where if you sit down and be quiet and let it fall what happens, you're part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not backing candidates in favor of you, whether it be door knocking for them, giving them a paycheck, and overall just projecting their voice, even making a simple social media post on your private account that is seen by 15 local people, that's 15 votes. And I've seen elections lose by 15 votes.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that you do or don't do matters when it comes down to policy and laws that are being made in our country and in our state.
Yeah, very interesting. So obviously it's election year, right?
Yeah.
We got Biden, Donald Trump,
Yeah.
the man. I have an idea of which way you might be voting. I know who I'm voting for, and I feel like there is a very large shift of Americans who are going to be voting for Donald Trump this year. He has specifically talked about on the podium school board reform and changing the current policies that allow the LGBTQ agenda to spread across the country. So I'm kind of curious as to what your take is on former President Donald Trump's view on the issue and how you can see him coming back into office to make changes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting, this political awareness that is happening now in our country is, in my opinion, one of the most detrimental things that has happened to the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. Because people are no longer following in blind faith to these individuals. I just saw this video of another LGBT advocate for my side go into Florida's Pride and start asking questions. And once Donald Trump was brought up, people flooded over there in defense of this man between people that were calling him idiot, dumb, because of wanting to vote for Trump. And people now are starting to become aware that Trump was the very first president to go into office embracing gay marriage. He just had a gay wedding at his house.
Yeah.
So it's like this idea of, he's a homophobic man is dissipating with the truth. And so for me, I am very happy that that is on his political forefront, because the left has made it very apparent that they want a stronghold of what your children learn and the aspects of their life, and keeping you in the dark while they do it, especially here in California. We have a bill that has just passed the State Assembly Committee for Education, and it's going to allow school districts to hide gender and pronouns from parents legally now.
Mm-hmm.
And it will overthrow the parental notification policy that has been placed in my school district, Chino Valley, and Temecula, and a few others, and removing local control.
Mm-hmm.
It is scary that your child can go to school, make such a heavy decision like this, and our state allowing you to be kept in the dark. And so for me, Trump is going to be a safe haven for government overreach when it comes to your children. And that's if he does what he says he's going to do.
Right. No, that makes sense. I wanted to ask your opinion on the whole, identification of pronouns. Me personally, I think it's rather ridiculous, but there are a lot of people, even people who are straight, and for example, they might be a straight woman, they'll say, I'm straight and I'm she, her, right? They'll just go along with it. Me, that seems ridiculous. I could find it a little bit more understandable if it's someone who's transgender and they want to do that. Okay, sure, but I'm not going to call you that, right? That's my opinion, but I'm curious as to what yours is.
Yeah, so I'm very, very open to the idea of understanding people's walks of life. When it comes down to a debate in reality, that's written in fact in black and white. Mm-hmm. And so if you want me to participate in a delusion because it makes you feel good, you're not going to mandate my speech. And simply being a huge proponent for that, I refuse to acknowledge people's pronouns, especially in a debate. Now, if we're sitting at a dinner table and we're just trying to have a nice dinner, I'm not going to go out of my way to be rude to you. Mm-hmm. But in a debate, it's written in fact. When we're creating policy and law, it's written in what is actually happening and transpiring, the facts. And that's where a lot of my opinion derives from. That's what a lot of people on social media embrace about my opinion, is that it's driven from facts, because facts are what should lead our policy. And that policy should help our community and not hurt it. Right now, you're starting to see companies mandate that you need to call people by their preferred pronouns, and now you're suppressing people's ideology and uplifting others simply based on what your preferences are. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's very toxic. I don't see the LGBT movement would have been successful had we started out that way. Mm-hmm. We started about with education, and people chose whether or not to embrace us or not. And flash forward all these years, now we're overly accepted in the community because we didn't mandate what you could and could not say. Right. We just educated people, and now the transgender community is taking a complete different journey than we did, and now trying to rewrite law to control what you can and cannot say. And so for me, when it comes down to pronouns, if you require other people to fulfill your mental state, then I would argue that you probably need to go find some self-fulfillment and therapy, because people say all kinds of things about me, and I give it no importance, because I care about what I think about me. I don't care what anyone else does. And the moment you do, you give power to other people, and I think that that's what the transgender community fails at the most.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So second to last question for you, sir. Mm-hmm. What is some of the most detrimental impacts you've personally seen to children who have been, I would say, victimized by the agenda being pushed by the school boards?
I think the saddest thing is when you see how happy these kids are when they go through gender affirming surgeries, and then turn around and regret their decision later. You have people like Chloe Cole, who was transitioning from female to male and had a double mastectomy at 16, and now regrets her decision. She is trying to detransition. She obviously won't be able to breastfeed her kids ever. Luckily, from my understanding, she can still get pregnant, but those types of things would have been ripped away from her had she continued down that journey. And knowing that there's little boys like me that played with dollhouses and put on dresses and played with my mom's makeup are becoming victim of this ideology because they're just not allowed to just be a kid is one of the most detrimental things I think I've seen. And it's sad because it's my community's mental health that is declining. And when I look at my community and the masses and the ways that they behave, for me, my heart breaks because these are my people. These are my community members that are being led astray by people with the money, by people with the loudest voices and false information. You have Katrina Foley, one of our county supervisors, pushing that my community needs to live in fear in this county.
In California,
not in right. And I was like, I always ask people, well, where's this open grave of all these dead LGBT people? Mm-hmm. Where's the manslaughter? Where's the beaten down gay people? Where's it at? Mm-hmm. We have parades now that aren't even targeted by people. We have celebrities faking gay hate crimes for fame at this point. Yeah. Like, where's the fear?
Yeah, like hate, like racism, homosexuality, those types of hate crimes are so rare. Like
9 cases were referred to our district attorney's office the year that she pushed her statement about gays needed to be in fear. Mm-hmm. And the 9 are comprised of both race, religion, sexual orientation, and gender.
And 9 is extremely low because each district attorney's office is getting like thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of cases each year.
Right.
So that's like 0.00001%.
Exactly. I think you're more likely to get struck by lightning than you are to experience a hate crime based off those topics that I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. But when you say as a politician that we need to live in fear, people believe you. And they start changing their life because of what you say.
Yeah, see, that's a tactic that many politicians use, is the fear tactic. And, I argue the thing that you should fear the most in this world is politicians and government in general. A lot of these things that the government tells you to fear, you really don't have to worry too much about it.
I've learned through deep diving into what our media has done. I remember back to one of my most viral videos, or my first viral videos, was they took a leaked audio from Melania Trump talking about Christmas. Mm-hmm. And she said, I don't give an F about Christmas.
Yeah.
And then they took that part and pushed it out there. But what they forgot to say is she doesn't give an F about Christmas because she's over here dealing with these orphans and making sure that they eat. She's over here wanting to go to our border and making sure that these kids are okay. She doesn't care about Christmas trees and decorating them. She wants to do this type of work.
Right.
And when I saw that, I was like, they really do prey on every word that these people say and misconstrue whatever they can.
Yeah. Even this is still a small podcast, right? But I have a little bit of audience out there, and I'll still get other people taking little clips of something I say completely out of context. Like, you don't hear the whole backstory or you don't hear the after story. You just hear that one piece. And any content creator has experienced this, right? One little thing that you say just in itself can sound terrible, but that's what people do. They ignore the backstory and the after story.
Oh, of course.
See that all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
That's the world we live in.
That's the world we live in. But you know what? Haters give you better ratings because you get more views, more interaction online. So shout out to all the haters out there.
Of course.
Thank you guys for helping us stay in business.
It's always those hate comments that can help push your message.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So final question for you, sir.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're on a good path here, in my opinion. I think you're in the good fight. I'm curious as to what's next for you.
I've never been asked that question. It's a really good question. Right now, I really want to raise awareness with parental rights and making sure that people understand how to obtain these rights back from your school districts and your local education and those types of things. But I do see a path that leads to elective office one day, and being able to champion parent rights and people's ideas that tend to be washed out because they are a little bit different and they just need a little bit more explaining that just sheds them in different lights. I go to, these pride events and I debate like the parental rights and education bill that was labeled "Don't Say Gay" in Florida. And I can get people to agree with it just based on wording things just a little bit more nice and with a softer hand. And I think that that's what's needed to build the bridge between all of this divisiveness.
Understood. What type of political office would you consider running for?
Yeah, so right now I'm still looking. Part of me wants to run for state office or federal office, but then also part of me wants to run for central committee and help the Republican Party and the conservative side win elections and actually be able to change policy and remain in our seats. Because I'm noticing now that the Republicans aren't great at winning. We've lost so much that we should be experts at winning now, and we're not. And there's a problem in that. And so I think that the Republican Party needs a big overhaul of how we do business because it's not working. So we'll see.
That makes sense. Well, hey, brother, let me know.
Yeah,
you got a friend down in Orange County.
Thank you
So
so
you are
much.
running for office out here in California. Let's see what we can do about getting your name out there.
Let's see. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that segment of the JD Show. Please be sure to hit like, subscribe, leave some feedback in the comment section down below. And then, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm Frank Rodriguez or Info Savage on all platforms. You can find me everywhere. Yeah.
And we'll also put all of his tags in the description section in the bottom, guys. With that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.